Welcome to Real Estate and Murder, a podcast about real estate and murder.
I am Amy Brockbank.
And I am Sarah Brager. We are both licensed real estate agents in the state of Utah who have a common fascination with true crime.
We are here to tell you stories of murder amongst the real estate community. It might be an agent, it might be a client, it might be an undetected serial killer.
When it comes to real estate crimes, some are predators and some are prey.
We just want to issue a trigger warning. The content of these cases can be difficult to hear from time to time, and please listen with care.
Hi, Amy.
Hey, Sarah.
Hi, welcome to Real Estate and Murder.
Real estate and murder.
This is our first episode.
It really is.
Brand new podcast.
We're excited.
We are really excited. Yeah, we really are.
It's been a long time coming.
It has been, and a lot of practice. So hopefully we nail this one and get it right. You know, I'm excited to do it. But let's introduce ourselves a little bit. Okay. So my name is Sarah. This is one of my very best friends, Amy Jane. And we are both real estate agents, active real estate agents, right, in the state of Utah. And we both kind of have this interest, this similar like interest and hobby and passion of ours, which we discovered was true crime, right? Which a lot of people love this genre, but we're fascinated by it. And we kind of figured out that there was maybe a little bit of crossover between real estate, crime, or murders. And so we decided this could be something we could talk about.
Yeah, who knew? Who knew?
Who knew? I mean, we knew, and we're telling you now. That's how this is going.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Amy, why don't you tell me, let's just give our audience like a brief introduction to what we do, like in our careers, right? So why don't you just tell us how long you've been a real estate agent? What you love about being a real estate agent?
Okay. I have been a licensed real estate agent for 5 years. And I started out doing admin assistant and did the background and then was director of operations for an agent and then decided to do my own clients.
Yeah.
So I focus mostly on SOI, and SOI is my sphere, like...
Yeah, your sphere of influence, right? So like your family, friends, your neighborhood.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to explain the jargon, so I guess we'll correct each other as we use real estate jargon that maybe not everyone's familiar with. But yeah, I love it. I love helping my friends and family. That's why I do real estate. That's why I choose the clients that I choose. And I love helping them achieve their dream house to raise their families. Like, that's my favorite thing.
Yeah, it's really very rewarding. Right?
Yeah.
Very rewarding. So for me, I've been in real estate for 5 years. And, you know, the thing I love about real estate the most is I love negotiating and I love strategy and I love being a mediator, which is really what I focus on. I focus on mediating the transaction so that my clients get what they need and what they want. And that's really rewarding to me. Of course, I love handing keys to a family or to friends. I love that part of it.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy the strategy of real estate. So I do
the negotiating,
focus
the
on
difficult offers.
Yeah. But doing it in a really professional and respectful way, right?
Yeah.
Which I hope sets me apart. I do want to note too, you know, you mentioned that you were an admin assistant and then a director of operations before you decided to do your own thing. In those types of positions, you see hundreds and hundreds of transactions, right?
Yeah.
So you've seen a lot.
Yeah,
we've got a lot of stories.
Yeah. I think as every agent has a lot of stories. Any profession that you're in, I think you see the good and the bad. So
that's fair. We did spend our morning up in Salt Lake City at the Realtors Day with the legislature, right?
Yes.
We both like to really educate ourselves on current topics. And so I just want to mention, we spent our morning doing that. It was really fun. We both learned a lot.
Governor Cox was amazing giving his address, just talking about the housing issues that Utah's facing. So yeah, if you're passionate about that stuff, write your legislatures, get involved in your community, in your cities and towns, and you know. Yeah.
And he was presenting us real solutions today, which was really interesting. So we have a lot of like real estate excitement today.
Yeah.
We're wound up. Okay. Well, hey, thanks for telling me a little bit about you. Appreciate that. So, you know, like I mentioned a little bit before, kind of the purpose of this podcast is to share, you know, our perspective in real estate as professionals and as imperfect professionals, right? In this true crime arena and how it relates. And so we're excited about it. But I do want to say and we'll say this as often as we can. We just want to make sure that we're clear that we are not here to give individualized real estate advice, right?
Yeah.
We are licensed in the state of Utah, but there's a lot of variance and differences in every market across our nation and across the world, of course, right? So we have a hyper local market that we know a lot about and we're very educated about, but we're not here to give intentional, direct real estate advice.
Yeah, we don't know the laws across the country or even worldwide on real estate transactions.
Yeah. So we'll talk about some stuff and incorporate it in there. But if you would like some real estate advice, you want to speak to a professional or transact in real estate, find a professional that you trust. So that's our disclaimer. Amy, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first case that we're going to talk about today, if you're ready to jump in. So we picked a topic that we both were very, very interested in and got even more and more interested in. And that is the well-known case of the murder of Lindsay Busiak, who was a real estate agent in Canada. And we'll tell you all about her in just a minute, but we do want to review and make sure we acknowledge all the sources that we do use. So we're giving credit to all of the actual investigative journalists and the people who have worked really hard on getting her case in the media and where it's at. And we're going to always, as always, we will drop all of the links that we used into our show notes if you would like to look at them further. We tried to be thorough. I do want to note, since we're mentioning these sources right now, that Amy and I discovered the more and more time we spent researching and practicing how we were going to present this information, that with this particular case, there is a lot of conflicting information, sometimes between the sources that we mentioned, but just in the media, because this case has stayed live and in the media. I mean, her father really, truly is driving.
Case.
Yeah, it is. So some of our notes might have some conflicting information, and we just want to say that up front because we've strived to be very thorough here, but that doesn't mean we can give one exact answer. We don't know. We weren't there. We aren't there, even though Amy has called their police department. We are not, present to say.
Yeah, we have not looked over any of the official records.
Right.
We've seen court records that Capital Daily has been able to acquire through their, I don't know if it's a Freedom of Information Act in Canada, but it's similar. It was. So, I mean, there's a little bit, but a lot of their stuff was redacted, and so we don't know the full story.
Yeah, we're telling you what we do know. So, how about I introduce Lindsay a little bit to our audience and tell them a little bit about her, and then we'll jump into her case. So Lindsay Busiak was born on November 2nd in 1983. She was born to her parents, Jeff and Evelyn, and she has a sister named Sarah. Now, Jeff and Evelyn are not married anymore, and that's a little relevant nowadays, but back then they were, a loving, cohesive family that were stationed, I'll say, out of Victoria, British Columbia, and they lived in Saanich, which we'll tell you all about.
Yeah.
Lindsay lost her life on February 2nd, 2008, and we will talk a lot about the dates and how they're relevant. So just a little bit about Lindsay. She was a licensed real estate agent, which is why she's the perfect subject for this podcast, right? Those who know her and loved her or do love her said that the real estate industry was suited for her. She was very bubbly, friendly, engaging, very social. And those are very good skills to have in our industry that cross over. She loved not just selling, but socializing. And so she enjoyed what she did, although she was new to the real estate industry.
Well, she's 24, so.
Yeah, she was new to everything in a sense, And she actually worked, we'll get into this a little bit more, but she worked at a brokerage that had a couple of close friends in her life, right? And people close to her, which we'll tell you a little bit about. She had a very good friend that I just want to mention now named Nikki Burrows. And she's mentioned in some of these sources and in some of the storytelling. So it's obvious that they were very close. They were very good friends. As a matter of fact, Nikki mentions in the Dateline episode that they called themselves, or referred to themselves as the Sex and the City girls, right?
Yeah, there was a group of friends.
Yeah, so very close, good friends. Lindsay did have a boyfriend at the time of her death named Jason Zalo, who was a licensed lender or mortgager, right? Who also had, according to what we know, a real estate license as well. So he was, double whammy there. He knew a lot about the industry. And his mother, Shirley, was a well-versed and very experienced real estate agent who managed the brokerage that Lindsay worked at.
Yeah, and at the time, Lindsay was with Remax Comoson.
Yeah.
Realty.
Yeah.
I'm probably not saying that correctly, but...
Well, we'll do our best to pronounce everything the best we can. But that's a well-known brand. So she was establishing herself and her business just as another introduction to someone who we will bring up into the story that was important in her life and ties into the case a little bit. Before she dated Jason Zalo, she had a boyfriend named Matt McDuff, and they had a notably a love story that was well known to their circle of friends and family, right? Yeah. So it's a little bit about like her life, who was in it, who were her friends, who were her close loved ones. And we just wanted to give some background on her so you guys knew a little bit about her. Yeah. She was beautiful. If you look at photos of her or footage or you watch the Dateline episode, she was beautiful, big smile. You can definitely see why people would be attracted to her as a friend, a human, and a trusted resource. So that's a little bit about Lindsay. So, Amy, anything else you know about Lindsay that I didn't know? I don't want to leave anything out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you covered most of it. Well, our audience will get to know Lindsay a little bit more throughout our episode.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Okay. Well, what we do know is that she lived on an island, right?
Yeah.
Victoria, British Columbia, in the neighborhood of Saanich. But Amy, why don't you tell us a little bit about the island? It's relevant for several reasons, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So back in 2008, which is relevant to, that's where everything kind of starts or ends for Lindsay, I guess. The population of Victoria, British Columbia was a little over 300,000. And those that live on the island, and like Saanich was a little smaller, it was a little more than 100,000. Everyone says everyone knew everyone. So when you hear small town, rural areas say like everyone knows everyone, and you know that there's only like 3,500 people, like that makes sense. But because I think people just stayed there, people grew up there, were raised there, they knew of each other. And so they were really tight-knit community.
I mean, it is beautiful. It's gorgeous. If you look at pictures, it's gorgeous.
For sure. And yeah, there's like lots of, Saanich is known for a long shoreline with sandy beaches. Like it's British Columbia. So water, clean air.
Forest scenery.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. What we do know is that because this is an island, there's only a couple of ways to access it, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good point. So you can either get there by a seaplane or by a ferry. So
what's a seaplane?
It's a smaller airplane. Like you're not going to get on, your little 747 and fly in.
Amy, what's a 747? Different podcast. Planes by Amy Jane. Yeah. So, but that's a small plane, right? So, we're just saying it's small in and out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit a lot of people.
Sure. All right. Well, one of the things that fascinated me the most about this case is the timeline. Mm-hmm. The timeline of her murder, we'll say. And it's so tight and so specific and has been so pinpointed that it's almost very clear and very helpful, but almost even more confusing and conflicting because things happen so quickly. It's frustrating to not know how we don't know everything, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's very interesting, but I do want to just go over kind of the bullet points of her day, of her murder, and then we're going to get into the details of those. Yeah. So we're going to give a couple timelines right here, and don't worry, we'll get into all of them specifically. So we are going to go to January 31st of 2008. Lindsay receives a phone call to her cell phone from a new client that is a husband and wife couple, as they say. Then on February 2nd, 2008, Lindsay loses her life tragically. So that's just 3 days later. So between the time that she made contact with this couple and to the time of her murder was a very short period. However, let's do February 2nd, the day of her murder. Lindsay had lunch with her boyfriend, Jason Zalo, and they were at a restaurant named Sauce. It referenced that in several of our resources. And so it either was a great restaurant or well known.
I don't think it's in. I don't think it's around anymore.
Yeah, it said it's closed, but I think they reference it because it gives proximity, right, to where the neighborhood is and how quickly this timeline moved. So they were at this restaurant called Sauce. I would love to know if they closed down because they only sold sauce, which is a very limited menu, you know?
Yeah.
So moving right along, she and Jason pay the tab and leave the restaurant at 4:24. Jason Zalo was then seen on a surveillance camera with a friend of his named Cohen at 5:30 p.m. There's speculation about what happened in between then, but we'll get into that in the details part. It is important that Jason and Cohen were seen on surveillance at 5:30 p.m. There was a lockbox on the home that Lindsay showed to the couple that are the murderers. I'll just go ahead and say it. I don't want to say suspects because they ended her life.
Yeah, the two people that she was showing the house to.
Right. So this lockbox, which records data for when agents open and close it to access the key. The lockbox was accessed at 5:29 p.m. And we'll get into this a little bit further, but there were two witnesses in the neighborhood that did see Lindsay with the couple outside of the home right before they went inside. So we're only at 5:29 p.m. At 5:38 p.m., Jason sends a text to Lindsay saying that he is on his way. He's going to join Lindsay at the showing, and we'll tell you why in just a minute here. At 5:41, Lindsay's phone dials an old contact in her phone. The line did not connect. There was no connection made, but that is important to note that at 5:41, a phone call was made from Lindsay's phone. At 5:45, Jason and his friend Cohen arrive at the home, but they park on the side or on the front. They move around just to keep an eye on when Lindsay's finished with the showing. He is trying to communicate with her and text her throughout this and isn't getting a response. At 6:05 p.m., Jason calls 911 and says that he cannot get a hold of his girlfriend who is doing a showing in a home that we know was locked and that he is going to break into the home. But he is calling for 911 help. And then at 6:11 p.m., Jason or Cohen.
Jason.
One of them calls.
Cohen's the one that called.
Okay. One of them calls 911 again to report that Lindsay has been found murdered. Mm-hmm. So from the time of the start of her afternoon from 4:24 to 6:11, virtually all of their moves are tracked.
Yeah, time-stamped.
Time-stamped, which is so fascinating.
Yeah.
So now we're going to get into kind of each of those bullet points, break them down, and explain why they're so interesting and how they give us so much information on her case. So let's start. Amy, are we starting back at lunch at 4:24?
Oh, we're going to
Or did we say enough?
On January 31st.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, let's go back. Let's go back to the phone call. I feel like that was one of the biggest parts of this case, so we should probably mention it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
So, on January 31st, Lindsay receives a call from a woman with a strong accent, which Lindsay later describes as either Spanish or Mexican, stating that her and her husband have been given a corporate transfer from Vancouver to Victoria. The caller gives Lindsay her criteria and tells Lindsay that they will be arriving in Victoria on February 2nd, 2008. Over the next few days, Lindsay receives more than 10 phone calls from these clients.
Which would seem normal, right? So just to step into our real estate roles for a minute here. First of all, I do want to note that this phone call came directly to Lindsay's cell phone.
Yeah.
Right? Which Lindsay felt was unusual. And we'll talk about why in just a minute. But it was on her cell phone.
So in 2008, all of Lindsay's marketing and everything, cell phones were around, but most people had the office phones. That was super popular. So all of her marketing material had the Remax office line on them.
Right. And so Lindsay did ask the clients in one of these phone calls how they had found her cell phone number.
Yeah, and they actually gave the name of one of Lindsay's past clients as a referral.
Yeah, they gave a specific answer.
So And then as they're talking, a corporate transfer, we've talked about this before. When someone says they're in a corporate transfer, like they're in a hurry. The corporate is usually paying for the move.
Right. Which means security in this deal.
And it's a for sure thing, really.
Yeah.
Because they're needing to move. And they gave Lindsay a bunch of criteria. They told her that they wanted to live near the city of Victoria within a 15 to 20 minute radius. They wanted it moved in condition. They wanted a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, a large master bedroom. And if possible, a housekeeper could have a separate entrance. They really stressed
specific.
New construction, and they needed to buy in 3 days. And their price point was $1 million, which $1 million now is a good price range for a house. But 2008, $1 million, that was for a young 24-year-old agent to have someone call them as a referral out of the blue and needing to buy in 3 days. Of course she's going to want to meet these people.
Yeah. And the 10 phone calls thing, why I think that's important is because, again, Lindsay had her suspicions. She had a lot of suspicions and she told several people about them. But this murder was so
red flags.
Red flags. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. This was such a premeditated murder. There was so many details. And my point is, with 10 phone calls, all the information Amy just mentioned, and naming a specific referral, they are building trust with Lindsay. Mm-hmm. They are being specific and clear so that they can dispel any red flags, right?
Even though she had some and just felt discomfort, everything that, as you're talking to another agent, if you had an agent call you on the phone and say, hey, this phone call is kind of weird, this is what they want, what would you say to that agent? Would you say, oh, let's wait? Or would you say no, you should totally show them the house?
Yeah,
based
absolutely.
on what you know,
Well, that is what happened, right? So Jeff Busiak, Lindsay's father, was also a real estate agent.
Yeah, he does corporate real estate, I think.
Yeah.
Commercial, I guess is what it's called.
And he's in Calgary, though, correct? Mm-hmm. Which is, it's off the island, it's a ways away.
Yeah.
Right? But she did call her dad and express some concern, primarily that when she was speaking with this couple, she felt like their accents were forced and fake. Mm-hmm. Right.
She told multiple people that.
Yep, she did. She told Jason, of course, and I'm sure others, surely, expressed their concern.
Yeah.
And so she was nervous, but they built some trust with her.
Yeah. So on February 1st, Lindsay emailed some properties that she had found. During one of the phone calls, police believe Lindsay provided the address for a house in Gordon Head, which is a seaside neighborhood in Saanich, located on D'Souza Place. And so she had found this perfect house that fit really all of their criteria. It was in a cul-de-sac, and there was new construction going on. This house was already built, but there was still the construction crew, the developer was still on site because of how new this location was.
Right. And a new construction home is important to this story because new construction homes are going to be vacant.
Well, and you think about it, they wanted to meet at 5:30 p.m., which is going to be dark. It's February in British Columbia.
Yep.
New construction sites usually don't have a lot of the street lights and different things that are available. So it's a very isolating place to be, I guess, in the evening. Construction crews have already gone.
Yep.
So
absolutely. Hypothetically, there wouldn't be a lot of neighbors yet.
No.
And they picked a cul-de-sac, so a quiet street where you don't have through traffic.
Yeah. I mean, there was a few neighbors because there wasn't a witness.
Sure.
2 witnesses, but yeah, for the most part, it's a new construction site is really isolating.
Right. Okay, so that's what we know about the location, right? Right, so what's next?
Yeah, so on February 1st at 7:15 p.m., Shirley Zalo, who, like we said, is the mother of Lindsay's boyfriend, Jason, overheard a conversation at Lindsay and Jason's condo between Lindsay and the clients. The couple wanted to meet Lindsay at 5:30 the following day. So there was a second witness that they were very specific. And I think they were telling her that they were coming across on the ferry at the last ferry, which was like at 4 p.m. or something, and that they were going to be there to see the house at 5:30.
Right. And I do want to say, so in later resources, Lindsay's father, Jeff, talks a little bit more about why the ferry is relevant. Mm-hmm. And I find it a fascinating piece of this case because, as stated, I don't live there, but as stated by the people that do, right, you can just buy a ticket to get on the ferry, mm-hmm. and you can even load a vehicle onto the ferry. And then you can get off, go do your business, and get back on the ferry for a return. Now, we do know that the phone that was used for the phone calls back and forth was transported on the ferry.
It traveled by ferry.
But why I think that's interesting is that if you're taking a plane, right, a seaplane, I've been told, then you're buying a ticket and you have to give your name.
Yeah.
And so on a ferry, you're just buying a ticket, doing your business, and coming back, which I'll get into a little bit later too, why I think that's so important. I think they had to be mobile, they had to have a vehicle, and they had to move quickly.
Yeah.
And you can't just schedule a commuter plane to like, hey, I flew in, I'm going to be back in like an hour. I got to go commit a quick murder. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Because they know who you are or what your given name is, or they're checking IDs, right? You would think, okay. All right, that's why the ferry's important.
Yeah, on February 2nd, so this is the morning of the murder, at 12 a.m., Jason returns home from playing hockey. While talking to Lindsay about her concerns, Jason reminded Lindsay that she had received a similar call from a woman about a month earlier. That client's budget was around $900,000 and had resulted in a sell. There was no indication that these clients are connected. And so I think that that's really disarming, as she clearly, several witnesses have stated that she has told them of their concern, of her concern for showing the house. And I think if you have a loved one that's telling you like, well, hey, like you just showed a house to someone you didn't know just a little bit ago, it resulted in a sell, like, why not try it this time?
Yeah.
It worked out before.
Those that she did talk to, primarily, I'm going to go ahead and say her boyfriend, Jason, advised her that it would be okay. And that, and he did agree to accompany her or be there for part of it, which would have been, for me personally, as a real estate agent, the final move, the final thing said or agreed upon to make me feel totally comfortable moving forward then. Yeah. Right? Because
someone else is going to be there with me.
Yeah. In our real estate businesses, especially as we're young and we're building, as you're building a business and we're growing, you have to, more often than not, take nowadays we take a lot of online generated leads, but back then, you were taking leads if your face was all over the bus stop, or the bus, or the side of a building. That was the type of marketing you did. But you will get strangers that call you. Yeah. Now, Amy, you mentioned at the beginning of our podcast that you primarily work with your SOI, which is some of the jargon we use in real estate, your sphere of influence,
friends and family.
So it is very, very different nurturing a business that is primarily strangers.
It is. And I have met with strangers.
Of course.
I mean, we all do. I think we're one of the only professions. I think people think, what the heck? Of course. Like, you're meeting them in commercial buildings or, vacant houses or whatever. And you don't know these people. And as fans of true crime, like, it's like watching those scary movies where you're like, don't go up the stairs, don't go up the stairs, don't go.
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
Why would you put yourself in there? But we have a job, like, and I don't think we've ever felt like it was weird.
Right. Yeah, I will say I got into, or very interested in the true crime genre, kind of around maybe just a little bit before I got into the real estate profession. And so since then, I'd like to think I'm a little street savvy, but it definitely added this extra element and layer of protection, because now I just assume that everyone's trying to kill me, especially clients, right? And so I made rules for myself pretty quickly, and especially back then as a single woman, I'm not going to do showings with only a single male after a certain time of the day or without a companion going with me, right? Yeah. Or in certain areas, or again, into the evenings. Like those are, and again, I'm bringing that up because Lindsay did listen to her gut.
She didn't
and
do anything wrong.
Not at all. Like,
yeah.
I would have, because of all of the trust that they built with her before, I'm saying, even though I tend to just assume that I'm going to get killed, I would have also absolutely trusted the situation.
Yeah.
And walked into it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's definitely, I think that's what fascinated us with Lindsay's story and how tragic her story is for the industry, and not only for the industry, but also for, all those that knew her and whatever. But it's a commonplace thing.
Yeah. So it was a very eye-opening thing, right?
Yeah. Somewhere around 2 or 3 p.m. on February 2nd, Lindsay stopped by her RE/MAX office to let some staff know that she was feeling weird and freaked out regarding the showing. Lindsay provided the receptionist and another coworker with the phone number for her, quote, $1 million clients to see if they could find a record with the agents in Victoria. No record was found. And I think that as she goes through this and she's just like, yes, all of this stuff makes sense, but I'm still having some red flags. And she doesn't really tell people other than the accent what the red flags were.
True.
Other than just a feeling, which, I mean, if you're having a feeling, don't do it. But
yeah. Right. Which is one of the big takeaways from this.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. For both of us, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Listen to your gut. Lindsay and Jason went to the restaurant, as Sarah mentioned, for a late lunch, and the bill was paid at $4.24. So again, we're now getting to the nitty gritty of it, and there are timestamps.
Yep.
Along the way.
Yep.
Lindsay left Sauce, presumably to head home to her condo to change her clothes. Jason headed to a business called SHC Autographics, which is an auto body shop. And the owners of the auto body shop had hired Lindsay to help sell a property, and Jason, who was a mortgage broker and a licensed real estate agent, as we've mentioned, was going to present an offer Lindsay had received. Jason arrived at SHC at 4:29 p.m. So Lindsay actually has, we call it a pipeline in our industry, but she has a lot of active clients happening.
Right. Yeah. Up and coming deals.
Yeah. So she was rocking it as a real estate agent in 2008.
Absolutely.
At the start of her career. At approximately 4:30 p.m., Joe D'Souza, who's the developer in the Gordon Head neighborhood in Saanich of the cul-de-sac, left the job site. And before he left, he has actually stated that he went through the house that Lindsay was going to show, and they had just cleaned it. And he was just kind of making sure everything was good to go because he knew that there was a showing. And so he left the site at 4:30, and his other workers left the area around 5 p.m. So
right. So now it's silent in the neighborhood.
Deserted cul-de-sac.
Right.
Court documents indicated that Lindsay's phoned Jason while he was leaving SHC to let him know that she was on her way to Gordon Head, and Jason offered to meet her there. Around this time, Jason receives a call from his hockey friend, Cohen Oatman. Cohen's statement has been redacted in those documents that we had mentioned. However, he stated that he had plans to meet Jason for dinner, and Cohen drives to SHC parking lot and leaves his vehicle. And so Cohen was just calling Jason to say like, hey, I think you called from a payphone, I think is what it stated, and that he was going to just be heading over there. Where was he at? And he pulled into the parking lot, and he actually got into Jason's car. See here, at 5:29, the real estate lockbox was accessed. And let's talk about a lockbox for a second.
Okay, yeah, let's do it. So at least nowadays, I'll just speak from nowadays and we'll work backwards. It's a very common tool, I'll call it, for agents to have. We call them Supras here. I'm sure there's other brands. And again, we don't know about Canada, but these lock boxes are opened and are closed by the agent when they're coming and leaving the home. So they keep the seller of the home's key inside of it. And the agent accesses it with an individualized code, which is how we know that Lindsay is the one that accessed the lockbox, right?
So we're all given, and right nowadays, it's on our phone. It's an app that we use, and we've all been given. So when we open it up, it sends either a text message or email or whatever, however that listing agent has it set up, information that the lockbox and who has accessed it. And it is time-stamped. It's like Bluetooth.
Yeah, Bluetooth connected.
But I know a few years ago in Utah, the way it worked, it almost looked like a garage door opener, and you would have to call in every day to have the code reset. And so each agent had their own, but it was like not with their phone. So regardless how it was back in British Columbia in 2008, regardless, there's still a timestamp for 529.
With Lindsay's code in it.
With Lindsay's information. So they know that it's accessed. At 5:30, both Jason and Cohen are seen on security footage getting into Jason's 2005 Range Rover. So they are leaving the auto body parking lot and they are headed towards Lindsay's showing.
Lindsay. And then apparently they're going to go get dinner after, which I'm just wondering why you'd go get dinner right after you just had lunch, but maybe you're still hungry after you only eat sauce.
They're hockey players.
That's true.
I mean,
that's fair. They are hockey players.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, boys eat a lot.
They do.
So according to the police department, Jason tried to plug in the address of Gordon Head property into his GPS. Because the property and development are new, GPS was not coming up with the directions. Jason called Lindsay asking for directions. Lindsay cut the conversation short saying, "Oh, I've got to go. They're here." Jason asked her to text him the address. Lindsay texted him soon after. And around 5:30, two witnesses saw Lindsay greeting the couple by the back of her BMW in the driveway of the home. There were papers on Lindsay's trunk, and she reached out and shook their hands. They described the woman as being Caucasian, 35 to 40 years old, shorter blonde hair, and wearing a distinctive patterned dress. It was kind of black and white. It was like a little swirly, and there was either red or pink waves is how the witnesses describe it.
Right.
And it's interesting because they describe two people, and they can kind of say what the woman looked like, but they were more focused on the dress because it was just so eye-catching. Yeah.
Right, so obvious. I do want to mention, I did in one of the sources hear that the witnesses relayed that it could be very, very, it could be a possibility that blonde short hair was a wig.
A wig, yeah.
Right. So they were close enough to get there and identify him.
And it just showed the fact that Lindsay didn't know these people. Because when you're showing houses and you've seen the client 6 times, you're not going to handshake them every time, or at least I don't.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, and so, and where she had papers on the back, there's usually, you know, some sort of contract of agency that you're usually signing to that gives you permission to be their representative in the deal.
Right, to advise them. Mm-hmm. And I find that so interesting because if she's having this new client that she's meeting sign this paperwork, they would have to be signing some kind of name.
Yeah.
And there is nothing in any of the sources, court documents where the police have released the names, whether they're aliases or not, of the suspects.
Yeah, no, Lindsay never wrote it down in her day planner. And I mean, she referred to them as $1 million clients.
But someone has to know. That's what fascinating. Someone has to know because those papers would have been recovered.
For sure.
You would think.
For sure. Yeah. And it's interesting about a signature because I'm a big fan of The Office. And I don't know if you remember the episode where Michael hits Meredith with his car.
One of the best ones.
Yeah. And she's in a cast, but she comes out of the hospital and wants Jim to sign her cast.
Right.
But
her pelvic cast.
Yeah. Jim signs her cast as John Krasinski.
Who's the actor that played Jim.
Yes.
Right.
That's his real name, because your signature is so ingrained in your brain.
Yes.
You're not going to sign a fake name.
Exactly.
So it would be interesting to see if that signature
was a part of the premeditation.
Yeah.
Right? Like sign with your left hand and call yourself John instead of Robert, because there's nothing that identifies these suspects, at least that has been released or disclosed. It could be, but yeah, that's a good point. It goes back to premeditation. Because if you're not thinking about it, you're going to do your natural signature and your natural name, right?
I think it's at 5:38 p.m. Jason replied back that he was just a couple minutes away.
In a text. Yeah.
And the text was never opened. And I guess we should probably note that Lindsay actually owned a BlackBerry, which neither of us have ever owned a BlackBerry.
No clue.
I don't even know anybody who had a BlackBerry.
Right.
So what it means that was never opened, I don't know if a BlackBerry opens an email or to open the text, but regardless, it was never open.
Or nowadays on the iPhone, you can have read receipts, so whatever it was like in 2008.
Opened.
Yeah, it was not open or not read.
At 5:41 p.m., Lindsay's BlackBerry pocket dials a friend in her contacts that Lindsay was not in regular contact with. The pocket dial resulted in a muffled voicemail message. And Staff Sergeant Chris Horsley on Crime Watch Daily has said that it's kind of important that they have this timestamp, because this is the time that they think Lindsay was attacked.
She had to have been, because this timeline is so tight.
And to just pocket dial someone.
Well, and we know Lindsay her body was found upstairs. If they accessed the front door 5:29, 5:30, they would have had to have gotten upstairs.
On the bottom level first.
Right. So there was a few minutes in between that.
I will say police believe Lindsay was murdered between 5:38 and 5:41.
Which you could only ever pinpoint 3 minutes because of this timestamped timeline.
It's crazy. I mean, I don't know of a single case that is this time-stamped.
Yeah, I don't know either.
The coroner puts the time of death at approximately 5:40 p.m. Lindsay was stabbed multiple times, and the forensic pathologist reports only one weapon was used. The autopsy has never been released, so the number of stab wounds is unknown and widely speculated. And I'll just say we've heard in excess of 54, and we've heard as much as a dozen.
Right.
So, but
which
I don't know.
Matters.
Does it?
No, were you just going to say it doesn't matter? Okay, it totally matters. And here's why I think it matters. 12 stab wounds is still overkill.
Yeah.
Typically,
54 stab wounds.
A couple would do it. We should also say that it has been said that the knife was as large as a butcher knife. So it's not like a small pocket knife or something, right? So a couple of stab wounds would be sufficient. I don't know that from personal experience, but it should be sufficient. So we're getting to 12, and these stab wounds, we should say, also were found in her chest, neck area, and then one in her back.
Well, and again, that information is coming from Lindsay's dad, who...
Right. Yeah, is very, very insider.
Yeah.
As inside as you can get.
Yeah, so the police, I guess I would say the police haven't released...
An official number. Right, and so location. 12 is already a lot. You get to 54, for one thing, that takes time. Based on what I've heard, listened to, have researched, known about these types of crimes, it isn't that easy to stab someone. You could be hitting bone. It's difficult. It takes strength, and it takes a lot of effort, exertion, right? And so the difference between 12 and 54 is a lot, but I think it's relevant because the more and more you get past the initial stab wound, the more and more violent and almost personal this becomes.
I guess when I was saying that it didn't matter was the fact that, you can kill someone with one stab wound.
Right. It doesn't matter in the sense that she lost her life either way.
I think that's what I was trying to...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, of course. Of course.
Yeah, so...
Okay, tell us more.
At 5:45 p.m., Jason and Cohen arrive at the home. They see the front door open and a male outside. They only see the back of the male. The male is described as Caucasian, 6 feet tall, possibly brown hair. And the reason why it's possibly is because it's dark.
Yeah. And the glass on the door, or surrounding the door at least, has been referenced as smoky or, not clear, which most front doors aren't clear.
He was wearing a classy brown jacket that hit below the waist. And classy's in parentheses. So, I guess it means
debatable.
Nicer. Yeah. The male suspect goes back into the home. Jason parked his vehicle on the opposite side of the street with his rearview mirror as the only way to see the home. He and Cohen sat in the vehicle for 10 minutes before Jason pulled his vehicle onto the side street, which was called Torquay, and parking to the side of the home for approximately another 10 minutes. And Jason has said in interviews that when he saw someone, he actually thought that they were just getting there. And that he didn't want to be the
overbearing boyfriend.
Yeah, that just shows up.
Sure.
Kind of maybe needy. And so he said he would be there, but he didn't really want to get in her way of the showing.
Right.
And so police have speculated because of her time of death that they were actually leaving.
Which is one of the most interesting parts of this case to me, and you know this because I talk about it all the time, is how the suspects exited the home.
Yeah.
And so to me, since he was seen at the front door, he went back in the home.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense to me, of course this is speculation, that he opened the door, saw a vehicle that could be a witness.
Yes.
And so he went back inside and shut the door.
Yeah.
But then also I wonder, and we don't have to get into this right now if it's not the right time, but truly the exiting of the home is the most fascinating part.
Yeah.
The most mysterious part.
Yeah.
Because
we'll go through that when we talk about more the details, the theories.
Okay. Yeah, totally.
Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. The exit is so fascinating.
Yeah.
Because they weren't seen any more than that.
No, yes.
But we also know they were there in a vehicle. So they had to exit, get in a vehicle, and drive back to the ferry.
Do we know they were in a vehicle?
Well, how else would they get there? I'm not saying the vehicle was parked in the driveway. They could have parked it somewhere else and walked on foot.
Of a vehicle.
Yeah, true.
Sometime around 6 p.m., Jason and Cohen exited the vehicle and walked up to the front door of the home. Jason saw through the opaque glass Lindsay's shoes lying in the entryway. Now, her shoes had been removed, and so he
totally normal.
Saw the front door was locked. According to Capital Daily, Jason rang the doorbell about 10 times with no answer. Jason and Cohen walked around the house looking for a basement entrance. Police documents stated that they found the entrance in darkness and the door was locked as well. So Jason, they're trying to figure out another way into this house.
Right, but that also, so I have to stop you for a second.
No, yeah.
Because as we've been researching this and again, practicing how we wanted to present this information, I haven't heard about this basement entrance, but that's another possible exit.
Yes.
And I do want to, again, just kind of bring up our real estate experience so we can tie this in. If you're walking up to the door of a home, your girlfriend or whomever is inside viewing the home. You look through the window and you only see one pair of shoes.
And he knows they were meeting them. She used
the
word them.
Yeah. That would immediately
they're here.
Come to my attention. I mean, maybe not. I guess if it wasn't mandatory to take off your shoes, maybe they wouldn't. But
yeah, have you ever had clients though that can't take off their shoes for medical reasons or decide not to?
No, Amy, what
really?
medical? Okay, full stop. Amy, give me one medical reason. I know you have a large medical background. I know. Tell me a medical reason why you can't take your shoes off.
So, for example, I have a family member that has, she's had so many surgeries on her feet that she actually can't walk barefooted.
Oh, okay. But that's not a reason to not take off your shoes.
Well, she wouldn't take off her shoes, though. She always leaves her shoes
Okay,
on.
let me back that up. It is a reason to not take off your shoes, but you're not incapable of taking off your shoes.
No, yeah.
I'm envisioning soldered shoes to your feet. And you're like, this medically, I can't. Don't ask me, HIPAA. Like, that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I'm just saying, like, maybe.
Sure, there's reasons behind it.
For people not being able to remove their shoes.
Okay, all right, we'll go with that. They had club feet and they couldn't take their shoes off. We'll go with that.
No, I'm just saying, like, but it'd be weird to just I wasn't
when I just said club feet, I wasn't referring to your family member. No. I'm bringing, and again, like these cases, we understand and respect that they're serious, and we want to pay, our respects to the victims and their family members. But it's necessary in these conversations sometimes to bring a little levity and some lightness to it because
otherwise it'd be really dark.
They're so dark and so difficult to talk about. So, but I do think the more important part, besides the shoes, is the fact that he tried to open the door and it's locked. Mm-hmm. And you and I have debated this a little bit. I would never in my life, as a real estate agent, go into a home to show it, whether I know the client or not is irrelevant, and then turn around behind me and lock the door. And so if I'm Jason, which I am not, and I have not asked Jason about this, of course, but that would be a huge red flag to me. Then I would go into immediate panic mode because that's not common, at least in my business. So give me your opposing opinion. Fight me about this locked door.
I'm not going to fight you. Yeah, no, I have gone into homes to do showings and I have locked the door because I didn't want other people to come in after us because of maybe some artwork, expensive artwork that's on the walls, or, the house is big and you're trying to like show and then leave. And so I have a handful of times, I don't do it every time, will lock a door behind me.
Okay, that is totally valid. But we do know this house was totally vacant.
Sure.
So again, that would just be a big tip off to me.
No, yeah.
If I were Jason, I know that there's nothing in this home.
I'm not saying, yes, that wouldn't have been a red flag because of course him knowing that she's in there, him seeing that there's only one pair of shoes, him seeing that the door is locked, and him and his friend trying to get another access.
Which is so important, because then they have to leave the front door area and go around the house and look for more points of entry. But I find that to be one of the most tragic parts of this case because it means that
every second is counting.
Every second counts, and they crossed paths or would have crossed paths within minutes, if not seconds of each other.
Yeah.
But they were in a different place. They could have been on one side of the house and the suspects were fleeing from the other side.
Yeah.
Right? That's so tragic to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Just how different this case would have unfolded just in a matter of minutes.
Absolutely. And I mean, you see someone running out of a home or running anywhere. If they stabbed Lindsay, whether it was 12 times or 52 times, there's going to be blood spatter.
Yeah.
Large volumes of blood that would have had to have gotten on one or both of them. And so if you do cross paths, they couldn't, my point is they couldn't just walk out the front door casually and be like, hey, have a nice day.
Yeah.
They had to escape a different way to not be seen, right?
Yeah. So back to around 6 p.m. when Jason and Cohen are trying to get into this house, there was a for sale sign that had the office number for the listing agent who happened to also be in Lindsay's office. And because it was after hours, Jason phoned his mother, Shirley. And we talked about because it's going to be an office line. It's not going to be like someone's direct cell phone.
Right. And he was like looking for a garage door code.
Yeah. So
he was asking.
She's the manager, was the manager at the RE/MAX office. And he asked for the agent's personal cell. And then Jason paged the agent asking for the garage code to the home. And documents do not say if any response was received. And Jason has given an interview stating the garage code was given, but it didn't work. He couldn't get it. And you've been trying, we've all tried to hurry up and get somewhere and we're punching in the numbers really quick.
Right.
Or, and some garage codes are a little tricky. You have to push
and
hold and there's some skill.
Right. Right. So they couldn't get in. They can't get in anywhere.
So at 6:05 p.m., so they're trying for roughly 5 minutes, Jason called 911 And according to transcripts, he explained that both he and his girlfriend were realtors, and she was meeting a female client from out of town. She asked him to follow her because she was, quote, kind of scared. He had arrived at the house after her and had seen a man, quote, in the door. And the door was locked. Her car was still in the driveway, and he could see her removed high heels through the front door window. And he asked police to come. And we've heard multiple sources say that Jason had told 911 that he was like going to break in.
Yeah, he's doing it at this point.
Yeah. So Cohen and Jason walk around to the side of the house and noticed an enclosed patio, and they saw the back patio door open. Jason boosted Cohen over the fence. Cohen ran inside the home, and Jason ran around to the front door. Cohen unlocked the door for Jason. Jason noticed bloody footprints on the stairs, and Cohen searched the main level. Jason ran up the stairs and found Lindsay's body upstairs in the master bedroom. Cohen phoned police at 6:11 p.m., and the police were already en route, and sirens can actually be heard on Cohen's 911 call.
Yeah, so let's back up a second to the patio door, because we know that Jason boosted Cohen over the fence, right? Mm-hmm. Which, Amy, you know from personal experience. It's harder to scale a fence.
It's hard to jump a fence.
Yeah. We'll tell you more about that some other time. But Amy has personally tested this theory, and it's hard to scale a fence. But so either way, which I'm saying because Jason had to boost Cohen, then there's no one to boost him, so he ran around to the other point of entry, the front door.
The front door.
But you just mentioned in your notes, which I had not heard anywhere, that the patio door was open.
Yeah, that is according to the documents that were.
So I wonder if they mean open, slid open, or unlocked. Because if you're telling me the door was open,
I think they saw that it was like the sliding door was actually opened enough that they could see that it was open. And we should note that police later find the back fence kind of kicked in a couple spots.
Like some broken slats.
Yeah. And so the theory is
in a new fence.
Yeah. The suspects went through the back of the house, opened the back patio door, and left through that way. And they had police dogs there pretty quickly on scene, but they didn't have them smelling the area where like the EMS team was, because it was too contaminated with all the smells.
Well, I'm sure when you're arriving on scene and you know that there's been a violent murder, there's a lot of chaos.
And there's a lot of people that get called in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because initially the call was, I need help getting into this house. My girlfriend's not answering the door. And then 6 minutes later, the call is, we've actually found a dead body.
Right. I think the exiting of this home is so fascinating to me.
Yeah. I mean, Jason, roughly according to coroner and everything, like she's found within 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So what I find curious is if they did exit through the back door, which I'm not convinced that they did, but if they did, and someone boosted someone over the fence, threw her over, then jumped over himself, I don't know. They're running away on foot because Jason was parked around the side street. You would think with all of the details, and he's been very specific and clear in his memory, he's given a lot of details. Did they not see a vehicle leaving or fleeing?
Well, him and Cohen were actually taken to the police station that night and questioned for several hours.
Yeah.
Because,
they were there with the dead body.
Yeah.
Of course, they're going to be the first people of interest.
If you think about it, the house had been cleaned. There's the developer that we know that was in the house. There is Lindsay and 2 clients. And then there's Jason and Cohen. And initially when this happened, police stated there was no DNA evidence.
Right.
Which contradicted, and they've later come out and said that there is, but, people had kind of speculated why Jason would immediately run up the stairs. Now, the stairs in this house, they're not like when you go in the front door, they're right there in front of the door. They're kind of off to the right-hand side. And so there was a lot of speculation at the time on some of these earlier podcasts on why Jason immediately ran up the stairs, but it makes sense if there's bloody footprints going down the staircase.
Right, of course.
Of course you're going to follow the trail of blood.
And I was caught off guard a little bit by that too at first when I heard that, right? That Jason ran in the front door and immediately up the staircase as though he knew where the body was found.
Yeah.
That's what was said. And right away, I'm buying into that. I'm like, yeah, totally makes sense. So suspicious. Wow. But I did hear later in another resource that Cohen went around and was checking out the main floor, and Jason went upstairs. That was their game plan. Split up, find the people.
Yeah.
And so I don't find it suspicious that he ran in and ran right to the staircase, especially because they were splitting up intentionally to find whomever was in the home. Yeah. So yeah, but again, the exit is so curious to me.
You've even wondered if they could have been hiding in part of the
I think they were. I think they were. Tell me when I have permission to talk about that. I'll wait until it's the proper time in our storyline here, but I will get into my whole theory there.
So, okay, I think...
Well, then can I get into my theory, or are we moving on?
I think we're going to take a...
Oh, we're going to take a break. Amy, do you want to...
Yeah.
Now that we've gone over the timeline, right? Because from here, we'll get into the theories, alternate theories, and suspects.